Superman versus the Elites is better than Superman 2025. Now, obviously, before we get into this, I got to say spoiler warnings for Superman versus the Elite, Superman 2025, obviously. So if you haven't seen any of them, I really recommend you go and watch them. Okay, let's get into it. If you're new here, hello, or hello there. I'm Uber Duck, and I like to talk about fictional characters, normally superhero series, TV shows, comic books. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, well, hopefully it is something that you're interested in. Stick around because that's the kind of videos that I like making. Right. Before I get a bunch of hate comments saying that I'm a Snyder fanboy, Superman 2025 is a better Superman than Man of Steel. I just get that out in the open. I'm not a massive Snyder fanboy. I like some of his movies. However, he doesn't do the Justice League correctly. He doesn't do Batman right. He doesn't do Superman right. I don't think Superman 2025 was a really good movie. Nor was David Cornsweet's Superman or James Gunn's Superman a particularly good Superman. There was a lot that they tried to get correct about Superman, but they fell short in a lot of ways for me. You know, maybe this movie wasn't for me or wasn't made for me. However, I am a Superman fan, and I felt like it really fell flat in some places. With that being said, I wanted to talk about what I think is one of the best Superman movies or best Superman I've ever seen, and that is Superman versus the Elite. Now, there are so many similarities in these two films that I genuinely believe that James Gunn used this film or this movie as inspiration for Superman 2025. And I'll talk about some of the similarities throughout when we continue on, or I continue rambling on. What do I like about Superman versus the Elite Superman? First off, we should talk about the appearance. Now, with David Cornsweet's Superman or James Gunn's Superman, I think his suit is something that you either love or you hate. I really hated it. I hated the way it looked on him. I hated the way he wore it. You know, it's not his fault. I don't hate him as the way he looks or anything like that. This isn't a dig at the man. You know, that would be weird for people to do that. I see a lot of people doing that with Supergirl, and I think it's really silly. You know, especially putting it out online. If that's what you think, that's what you think. But it would be stupid to put that out online. It's different if you're talking to your friends or something. Everybody does that kind of thing, but yeah, it's not his physical appearance, like what his face looks like, as per se. It's more of the suit for me. You know, I really like the sharp logo. That's really cool. But the actual suit, the way it fits, I really don't like. And that's something that I do actually like in the Man of Steel. You know, the Man of Steel suit is a bit too dark, though. If it was a slightly brighter shade of blue, I think it would be better for me. And I think a lot of animated films make him like a bright blue, you know, big blue, for instance. And I like just the clean cut look of the Superman suit in a lot of the animated films and some of the live action films, you know, with like Christopher Reeves, for example, you know, they're just a plain white. I really like that look. Don't know why. That's just my opinion. What they did do well with David Cornsweet's appearance, though, is making him look like a normal person when he isn't Superman. You know, the hair change where it's more curly and isn't well kept and doesn't look like Superman. They do a really good job of getting away with that, and I can actually see how somebody wouldn't believe that he is Superman. With that being said, I prefer the look in a lot of the animated films. So, for example, Superman versus the Elite, All Star Superman, and Batman: The Dark Knight Returns. Superman in that film. I prefer the look of the suits. I prefer the look of the physicality of Superman in those. Now, Superman 2025 has got one of the best and worst fan bases I've ever seen. All people do is bombard people who don't like the movie. So, you know, if you want to bombard my comments, say you don't like it, whatever, or sorry, say you don't like my opinion, that's absolutely fine. It's a lot easier to get what you want an appearance to look like an animated because you can literally well draw it, but they can animate what they want a certain character to exactly look like. So the director can say, no, actually, I want this, I want this, I want that. You know, you can fine tune it. Whereas there are limitations to actual real life versions of these characters, and you have to take that on board when thinking about how realistic or how well does a character look. However, even with all that, I still don't think that David Cornsweet looks great as Superman. One thing I would like to add though, in the trailers for Man of Tomorrow, I think it's Man of Tomorrow, yeah. In the trailers for Man of Tomorrow, his suit looks so good, and the way David Cornsweet is carrying himself in these trailers, it looks a lot better than they did originally in the first film. Now, I don't know if it's a subconscious thing, but something just looks different. And I think that maybe James Gunn has actually listened to some of the fans and have taken that on board, which I'm so happy about because I don't hate James Gunn. I'm not a massive James Gunn hater, you know. I really enjoy Guardians of the Galaxy. I really enjoyed Peacemaker. That show is so good. Power scaling, right? Okay, so there's always a problem with Superman. How strong can you make Superman? Well, you either make him god level strong or you make him totally weak. James Gunn may have struggled with that because not struggled. I think it might have been a choice to make him more of a weaker character, and that is a it's a good choice. They brought him down to earth a little bit more, made him not as powerful as comic book versions of him, perhaps, or adaptation. This is a good thing. There are some people who want Superman to be this god tier level superhero. It's really hard to enjoy a film where Superman is that powerful. A lot of those films have to lean into the morality of why he does things. That's where they fail. They don't do a good job of it. Whereas James Gunn's Superman 2025 has done good, just that little bit weaker than what some people might have thought he would have been, you know? There's nothing in particular that made him look insanely weak, don't get me wrong. However, we don't see him doing outlandish stuff like flying at a million miles per hour or lifting a meteor above his head or things like that. We just don't see him doing it, you know? We see him fighting like a kaiju, for example, and he's lifting the kaiju up and things like that. But even that fight seemed a little tamed for Superman, as in he could have taken out that kaiju more quickly than he did in that movie. I know he didn't really end up doing it in the first place because he didn't want to kill it, but I feel like Man of Steel Superman would have definitely killed that thing, and that's a problem in itself. However, I feel like James Gunn made him too weak sometimes. It's hard to find that balance, I'll give him that. In versus the Elite, Superman is also on that level where he seems weaker than other versions of Superman. He is always getting in fights and getting knocked about, especially when it comes to the Elite or the Elites. Call them the Elites? Yeah, let's call them the Elites. Let's go with it. So, especially when he's versing the Elites, it shows that he can actually get hurt by these people, which is a really good thing because it shows these people are, as a group, able to maybe hurt Superman, you know? The question is whether or not he's holding back, and that's always a question with Superman. And I'm sure a lot of people say in 2025, Superman 2025, that is, that he was holding back, and Superman is always holding back. This might be true for both. However, in versus the Elites, it shows at the end of the movie, spoilers obviously, but it shows at the end of the movie that he was really, really holding back. Yeah, it does the character justice and just shows how much restraint that he shows, you know? Whereas I don't feel like we got that in Superman 2025. You know, correct me if I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong or if you think I'm right. You know, start a discussion on this. But Superman versus the Elites is better at showing that there is power in restraint and that Superman has to be the most restraint hero. The whole point is that if Superman really crosses that line, how scary it would be. And that film does such a good job of showing it. So when it comes to Superman's power scaling, I really think that Superman versus Elite just takes the cake a little bit for me, you know. God, I feel like I'm going to get a lot of flack for the things I'm going to say about Superman 2025, man. That fan base is crazy in a good way, you know, but sometimes too much. I see it online. There's just too much, man. Both Supermen are steadfast in their belief systems. It's really refreshing to see a Superman who is hopeful. You know, the whole message of Superman 2025 is that Superman, although he is an alien, is also a human and has human problems. And they do okay to, well, they do, yeah, just okay to show that to you and tell you this and try and make Superman more human. It's refreshing to see a genuinely hopeful super. A lot of normal people who don't watch animated shows or cartoon haven't seen a really hopeful Superman who stands for what's right in a long time. They're stuck with Man of Steel Superman, which has got its own issues. And you know, the S might stand for hope on his planet, but here it is just an S. I don't think Man of Steel stood for hope, whereas Superman 2025 definitely, definitely does stand for hope, and it shows that. Both Supermen believe in being a force for good, and that it's not right morally to kill your enemies. And in both movies, this is a big sticking point. This is a big sticking point. This is a big sticking point, finally, for both of the Supermen. In different ways, albeit, but both Supermen, they both want to stop the lives of innocents. Nope, that's wrong. They both want to stop the death. Ugh. They both want to save innocent people and would happily give their own lives for it. We know this for both of these Superman, and I can't take it away from Superman 2025. They do a good job of showing this with this Superman, you know. He genuinely cares, and so does Superman versus the Elites. So, why do I think that one is better than the other? Great question. Both Supermen were turned on by society at large. In the Elites, it's when the Elites are killing their enemies and finishing them off, and the world believes that this is the answer to their problems of the villains.
There's another way. They have to see that someone believes in humanity strongly enough
To die for them?
And in Superman 2025, it's the message of his parents being released to the public, where they basically tell him to take over and be an overlord of Earth, and he didn't know this as well.
Lord over the planet as the last son of Krypton.
Both are genuinely turned on by the people of Earth. So in Superman versus the Elites, the world at large believed that Superman's ideals of morality or morals, whatever you want to call them, wasn't the right ones that they needed at the time. So they believed that finishing off the enemy, as in killing them, was the right thing to do and is what was needed. This sends Superman into a deep reflection of himself, where he questions his place in the world.
Come on, it's not that simple. I don't think that I make them feel safe anymore.
Yet again, similar to Superman 2025, he also goes into a deep reflection, questioning his placement in the world. So Superman in the Elites is not questioning his own morality, really. The rest of the world is, but he isn't really questioning his morality, whether it's right or wrong. It's whether the world wanted Superman. What a question. I just love that idea in a film, and the way that Superman deals with that question really shows his character. You know, he has that discussion with Lois Lane where he says he can hear children saying it will be fun to grow up and be a superhero because it'll be fun to kill your enemies. And this genuinely shocks Superman. He's trying to explain to Lois how this makes him feel, as in the reason he's fighting back. And, you know, it tells us he's listening to the world and contemplating what they're saying, and just how desperate people are in this universe, that they turn to the Elites for a final answer to their problems. So she's worried that the Elites actually will kill Superman, but he is willing to die rather than stand by and let these people kill criminals who should be put in prison and rehabilitated, you know, which is a big thing with Superman, about rehabilitating enemies and things like that. Yeah, Friggy should sponsor this video. He would rather die for his beliefs than let these people carry on the way they are. I think that says a lot about this Superman.
On my soul, I swear that until my dream of a world where dignity, honor, and justice are the reality we all share, I'll never stop fighting. Ever.
Superman in the Elites wants to prove that there is a better way, and he has to be the example. He leads by example. He doesn't stoop to their level, even though the rest of the world would be happy if he did do these things, as in he did these people. He doesn't stoop to that level. He sticks by his morals because he knows what's right and what's wrong. In his moment of self-doubt, he goes to where a lot of people would go. He goes home. He goes home to speak to his dad and have a bit of like pie or something like that, you know. Really, yet again, normalizing Superman, which is such a good thing to do. Normalizing Superman by putting him in these normal environments goes a long way to just build that character development. Superman's parents in this animation are perfect. You don't see much of his mum, which is a shame. However, you get such a good talk with his dad, as in Jonathan Kent, who's voiced by Grandpa Max. I mean, can you get any better than that, you know? I was like, oh my god. I watched this film recently before making this video, but I had also watched it when I was a kid, and I hadn't picked up on the fact that that was Grandpa Max back then, and I did now, and I was so happy. In his moment of self-doubt, his father puts him back on the straight and narrow. Truth, justice, and the American way. Look, I'm English, you know. His father puts him back on the straight and narrow.
Truth, justice, and the American way. It ain't broke, so don't fix it. If those knuckleheads don't quit tugging on your cape, you can always kick their self-righteous asses to kingdom come.
Basically says, get out there and do what's right, and kick some asses along the way. It was such a good moment and a really good representation of what his father is and should be. I'm looking at you, Zack Snyder. You ruined Jonathan Kent. Great Superman stories really need fantastic Martha and Jonathan Kents in them. That's why Man of Steel cannot be a great movie. It's because his father was shit.
What was I supposed to do? Just let him die?
Maybe.
Is just a terrible representation of what Jonathan Kent is and should be. Whereas both of these movies do a fantastic job at showing Jonathan Kent. That's another similarity, is that in their moment of need, they both go to their fathers for a pep talk, let's say. And the pep talks couldn't be more different from each other, you know, and both serving slightly different purposes. However, in the end, reaching the same end goal. And I just feel that the Elite's pep talk from his father was a lot better than Superman 2025's. There's no like right or wrong in this. I just loved it. Maybe it's because I like the voices in Grandpa Max. I don't actually know who voices him. However, I'll put it here now who voices him. Maybe it's just because of that. However, I liked his accent. I liked how clear cut he was and straight to the point, and just how funny it was, you know. In Superman 2025, it's really more of a serious moment, and tonally it's a different moment, but that's what that film needed, I guess. That's what James Gunn wanted for that. And, you know, that isn't a bad representation of Jonathan Kent at all. It's a good representation. However, I feel like Superman versus the Elites was just a little bit better. Well, I say a little bit. It's a lot better. You know, both are just small scenes out of the entire film. However, both go a long way into moving the film along and moving Superman as a character and just improving Superman, making him better, making the whole story better, you know, bringing him down to earth as a son. It makes him human, and that's what both films are doing, really. And yeah, they both just go a long way just to set it for me. And I love both scenes. However, one I just love more than the other, you know. But now we've got to move on to Lois Lane, because this is probably where I might upset a few people. Yeah, Lois Lane. Right. In the Elites, Superman and Lois, or Clark and Lois, are an established couple. Obviously, the world at large don't know that they are together. Fine, that's okay. However, they are together and they seem a lot more put together. Well, not seem, they are a lot more put together than Superman 2025. There is a lot of flirty scenes, and
if she knows anything, I'm the Martian Manhunter.
And there go all of my fantasies.
a lot of intimate scenes with Superman versus the Elites with Lois Lane and Clark, and I really, really enjoyed their version of Lois Lane. Even though that she feels that Superman may lose this fight, she still questions him. However, she is still there for him. I think that in Superman 2025, you have that interview scene. Now, I absolutely hate that interview scene. To me, it doesn't make sense. I know she's trying to train him, if you want, or practice interview techniques. However, she was really poking him in things that she knew he wasn't ready for. She made Superman lose his rag a little bit and
People were going to die!
lose his temper, and I hated that. I hated the fact that she made him shout out, and I hate the fact that he let himself get to that point. Yeah, I just couldn't believe that he actually shouted at Lois. But the fact that she thought it was okay to put him into that position rather than working through it with him was silly. And I fucking hated it. Hated every bit of that scene. And the fact that they're not an established couple, I get it. You want to tell the origin story of Lois Lane and Superman. However, you've kind of skipped that already in this movie because they're kind of together and you've made her not sure of their relationship. I hate it. I just absolutely hate it. You know, her whole I knew this. What was it she said? Like,
Is wrong.
I knew this would never work.
What does that mean, Lois?
that's not what I want from Lois and Clark. I want them to be a unit. I want them to love one another. And the reason they've done this is for character development. It makes sense. However, I just didn't want it. And that's the key differences. In the Elites, you can really get a sense of flirting from both of them and nice little flirty banter with each other. And they really feel like a unit. I didn't like their scenes together, you know. A lot of people say they've got so much chemistry, blah, 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 you know. Cool, that's fine. However, the fact that the whole beginning was just so rocky, you know, their whole relationship was just rocky as a whole. I hate it. I wanted them to be a unit, you know. Hopefully, they improved that in the other films. I just didn't like it in Superman 2025. Superman versus the Elites. You have the whole opening scene where she is basically holding him accountable for his image in the world. And it's such a good scene, you know. That's what I mean. This film, it isn't very long, but it does a really good job of showing what these people are about, as in what these characters are for and meant for. You know, Lois is his partner. She's a rebel. She will get to the truth. You know, she has her own arc in the film where she goes out to find the truth about Manchester Black or Chester, you know, where with his sister. And it's just so good. Even when they're arguing with each other, that you can see there's a lot of love there. I just don't feel that way with Superman 2025 when they argue in that interview scene. I really feel like that interview scene does a lot of damage to her character in the whole film. It's what really sold it for me. I put a pin in it, but I just think that the Elite's version of Lois Lane is better overall. I'm gonna get so much hate for this, man. Hopefully, in Man of Tomorrow, which I will be going to see when it comes out, or even Supergirl, I'm hoping that they do more to develop her character and make her and Superman one. And by one, I mean not like, oh, they're one. I mean like, you know, they work together well. Better. Just hopefully just make her better, man. Okay, let's move on to villains. The big bad of the films. Right. So you've got the Elites, but the main villain in the film is Manchester Black, or we'll call him Chester from now on. He is so freaking powerful. His power set is unbelievable. He's basically a telekinetic and telepath, you know, like a Jean Grey or Xavier. Not on their levels, albeit. Well, he's telekinesis maybe, but his telepathy definitely not. He is shown to be able to lift extremely heavy objects with his mind. He can create force fields. He can also telepathically communicate and show people images. Mind control things like, I don't think he has that ability. However, what we have seen him do is be able to push Superman telekinetic ability and also create force fields that can withstand Superman's punches. Now, I'm not understating how powerful that is, because that is absolutely crazy. Maybe Superman was holding back, but even if he's not, that is still a feat in itself. We've got that Skull villain, the purple-headed Skull villain. I can't remember his name at the moment. I'll put it here somewhere, but he fucking blows that geezer's head off with an imaginary gun. Gets his hand and he uses it like a gun to fire off his fucking head from his shoulders. It was such a deep scene, and it was crazy because it just shows just how savage and how powerful this guy really is. Like, as in, Superman was going toe to toe with this guy, and Manchester or Chester just decides it's time to finish him. You know, he's escaped too many times. I'm gonna finish him off. Wow. You know, yet again, Superman's probably holding back. I've got to say that Superman is holding back, as in not wanting to kill the Skull villain. But still, to be able to do that to somebody who can withstand Superman's punches, you know, there's some level of resistance there or invulnerability there. That is absolutely crazy, man. I'm just going to say it. Chester is a better villain than Lex Luthor, played by Nicholas Hoult. I fucking hated the Lex Luthor in this. Chester's backstory and origin from an abusive household and then getting these powers later on is such an amazing story. You know, we don't really get that with Lex in this. Then showing the twist of Chester actually killing his father by causing a heart attack and saving his sister from a train by stopping a train and hurting and killing a lot of people in the process, you know. His hero origins were shown to be false, you know, and all the rest of the Elite also are false heroes anyway, you know, they are quite bad people. That origin story lends a lot to Chester's character development and why he does what he does. Whereas with Lex Luthor in 2025, he doesn't have an origin story. We just have Lex Luthor, and he hates Superman. In fact, he despises Superman, and he just comes off as such a whiny bitch in these films. I don't know what the thinking was behind it. I get it. Lex Luthor hates Superman, but he just hates him because he's an alien. Fine. But the way it comes across is that Lex Luthor is almost jealous of Superman. That's okay, but that whole speech where basically Superman has won and he's flown into the thing and shoulder bashed Lex, what the fuck was that about? Superman gives this whole entire speech. What are we talking about, bro? He has to give this speech to prove to Lex that he's human, this, that, and the other, blah, 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 yeah? Fine. Yet again, that wasn't for me. And I like that meme where Lex's POV, when he moves out of the way of the light, that whole speech is just cringe. I think Lex goes, you're a fucking alien. The whole thing is cringe. What they done with Lex Luthor, they tried to modernize him, I guess, you know? I just hated it. And, you know, he can make a clone of Superman and, you know, that's definitely going to be Bizarro in the future, you know what I mean? Because Superman didn't kill him, he threw him into a black hole, and you know, if you don't see the body, they're not dead, kind of thing. So I think he's going to be Bizarro eventually, turn into Bizarro. You can make a clone Superman, but you can't figure out who Clark Kent is. You know, they say hypno glasses. Okay, bro, fine. Hypno glasses make people think and see differently. However, is that going to trick CCTV? I don't know. Maybe it's like magic where it can do all those things. You know. All right then, fine. Yeah. I guess so. He can make a pocket dimension, recreate the Big Bang, and, you know, do this and do that, but he can't make kryptonite. He has to rely on Metamorpho, who is forced to work for Lex Luthor through fear and things like that. I feel like Lex Luthor should be smart enough to have a contingency for this, you know, a contingency for Metamorpho not wanting to work for him and then leaving it up to a guard to save the baby from Superman, all that, you know what I mean? It doesn't scream Lex Luthor to me. But what do you think? Let me know what you think. Chester is a more interesting villain, in my opinion, because they're trying to do the right thing in their view. The elites wants to end the lives of the villains that they face because they think it's the right thing to do. You know, it's the final answer. Villains are more interesting when they believe what they're doing is right. What Lex is doing in this movie by having this whole war, manipulating this war for both sides, making profits, this, that, and the other, he isn't really that interesting. A lot of the smart things he does are off screen. Like I said, cloning a Superman, he's done off screen, you don't really see it. Lex is manipulating the hate online of Superman in this film by using rows and rows of these like monkeys who are like typing away, like brain controlled monkeys typing away. Obviously that's done to visually show that he is manipulating people's hate comment online about Superman. That is so stupid when we have algorithm and AI and technology. Now, is it so stupid to think that Lex could build a machine to do that for him, like AI-driven machine, rather than using a bunch of monkeys? It doesn't make any sense. It's just a visualization of that, I guess, in this movie. It was so stupid, in my opinion. You know, I didn't think it was needed. You could have shown it in a different way that didn't think that the audience would miss it if it was just a machine that was manipulating hate comments or something. I don't know. I just think it was dumb. When villains believe they're doing the right thing, that makes such a difference in the character itself and how the audience feels about the character. Now, a lot of people absolutely love Lex Luthor in this, and listen, he is the ultimate hater. In this film, he is the ultimate hater. Literally, makes a clone of Superman, tries to do this, tries to end Superman, sets him up online. He's basically he is trying to destroy Superman. But the reason that he's doing it is just stupid. It didn't feel like it had any substance. I think I've been spoiled because I've got the entirety of the Smallville series, which has got the best Lex Luthor we are ever going to get, I think. I'm sorry, but that is just the truth. And if you think differently, you can go and argue with this fucking wall, you know what I mean? Lex Luthor in Smallville was epic. This Lex Luthor just comes off as a massive whiny bitch, and maybe that was the point, to make him look weak and small and all of that, and that is not, to me, what Lex Luthor is, and it's not what I want from Lex Luthor. Yeah, it was just disappointing, you know, and it's not because of Nicholas Holt's acting. You know, all of the actors in this, I believe, actually portrayed it in the way that they were told to do it. You know, I'm not saying that anybody is a terrible actor here. You know, especially Nicholas Hoult, he's fantastic, you know, and he is fantastic at being this character. But do I think that it is what Lex Luthor is? No, yet again, I'm not a Snyder fanboy. Jesse Eisenberg, as in, long hair Facebook Lex Luthor, is also shit. Terrible. Disgusting. Chester's a better villain than this. Both films have a war in them, which is and also another coincidence. There's a lot, like I said earlier on, there are a lot of coincidences or similarities in between these films. But how he treats both wars in these films are completely different. Superman 2025 directly gets involved with the conflict and tries to assert his dominance over the bad side, which Lois Lane rightly questions him on. She shouldn't have made him break like that, and Superman should never break like that. However, she was right to question him on his actions because he is getting involved in international war and deciding to side with a side, as in having biases. He was right to. He is not wrong in this scenario. However, how he goes about this is the wrong way to go about it. And I think that's what she was trying to explain to him, but she just fell short. He isn't listening. In Superman versus the Elite, how he handles the conflict here is by not letting any side kill each other. Whenever there's a conflict, he gets directly involved and just stops them from hurting one another, actively killing each other, not particularly siding with any side. If one side is the aggressor, he stops them. If the other side is also the aggressor, he stops them too. Yeah, it was such a it's the correct way to be Superman, in my opinion. Obviously, sometimes he's going to be put into a spot where he has to act. Kidnapping a leader of a state and then threatening them or whatnot isn't the correct way to do it. The fight scenes in the Elites are so fucking cool. That's the problem when you're comparing animation to live action. Live action is always going to be limited by what it can do, whereas animation is a free for all in what you can do. And the fight scene is just so cool. The skull guy, the old purple headed skull geezer, and that was every punch felt powerful, every hit felt like it had weight behind it. Really, really well done, like a good fight. The damage that is done, it feels like there's a lot of collateral damage, and it's really trying for Superman. Or Superman is forced to try to stop this guy. Then you've got the fight scene with the Elites at the end. Wow. Come on. You've got the whole cyclone bit when Superman is spinning around and he's grabbing them and with the wind and just into the darkness, and then they're basically isolating members of the group. And it was really good to show how powerful Superman was, and it was genuinely a scarier side of Superman. Which that's what he was trying to prove to the world, is how scary Superman could be if he was willing to go to that point of killing.
If you had super hearing, any second you'd hear the pop.
The Elites genuinely believed that he had crossed that line at that point, and the fight scenes are just epic. I mean, the whole scenes with Chester versus Superman when he's doing his like telekinetic blasts, so cool, and with his force field when he's trying to stop Superman, and then what does Superman do? He doesn't obviously kill Chester. He doesn't do that. That's not his bag. He removes the part of the brain that is causing his powers. Basically, he maims him in a way that it isn't so much like cutting off somebody's arm or something, but he removes his powers from him. He takes away what makes Chester him without killing him though. And that's the important part, without killing him. It was so scary to see. I hadn't even thought that that is something that Superman could do. Apparently in the comic books it's temporary. In the movie it's suggested that it's permanent, and it's a permanent damage that Superman has done to Chester, and it's shown that they take away the other members' abilities as well, which actually made me think, you had this skull geezer, and what did they do with him? Well, they used him as an energy generator, basically. So they siphon off the excess energy from his body in the jail cell, which was so interesting. I don't think I've seen somewhere else where they've used someone's abilities to their benefit, as in the government have used, somebody who can generate electricity, they've used his powers to be able to generate more electricity than they normally could. Why not? He's more useful to the government by taking the energy from him. He's serving his time and also being a benefit to society. Well, okay, well, in this film, his actions would have killed people. if Superman had those options to be able to take away someone's abilities, I think he would have used them earlier on, which is a dangerous thing to think about because you have to start asking yourself, well, what makes somebody somebody, you know? You're taking away a part of them permanently. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Yeah, and then like I said earlier on, you've got that scene where Chester uses an imaginary gun, as in telekinetically, to blow the guy's head off his shoulders, the skull geezer, and it's so cool. And all my mind went back to is that part in the Clint Eastwood film when he gets the gun like this. Yeah, it made me think of that. However, it was cool. It was a turning point in the group's actions and how they were treating villains, you know. They were telling the world, this is who we are. So cool, such a cool villain, you know. Fight scenes are really good, and what they done with the fight scenes in this film was really good, you know. They used there's no wasted parts in this film. Every scene is to tell the story, you know. So yeah, earlier on I mentioned these bugs. They're like these giant bug things, and like in Superman 2025, he doesn't want to kill these things until he knows that they're not sentient. So basically, they don't have a brain; they're just pure instinct. So then he does stop holding back, and I think he uses his ice breath in this to stop them and stop them dead in their tracks. Basically, you know, because that aligns with Superman's moral code. Cool, yeah. Let's look at it in Superman 2025. You've got that big monster, the kaiju, you know, the massive monster, which he doesn't want to kill anyway. And in this film, they really try to show how much he values life as a whole. So the kaiju stamping down and there's a dog, so he blows the dog away. Fine, that makes perfect sense. And then they have him saving a squirrel. Look, Superman believes that all life is precious. Yeah, I get that. But I was just like, really? Saving the dog was enough to show that like all life, you know, is valuable to him. To show him saving the squirrel, it's a wasted scene. And I know that sounds silly saying that, but it is a waste of time to show him saving the squirrel. You know, there's bugs that are definitely going to get killed underneath in the ground that the kaiju stamping down on, for example, in the grass or whatever. There's going to be bugs and life in there that Superman ain't too worried about getting crushed or things like that, you know. And yeah, I think it was a really weird thing to show, and you know, I think people either love it or you hate it with this movie, you know. And I don't hate this film, you know. There's just a lot of room for improvement for me, and the squirrel scene. I don't know why I have a problem with it. It's not that I have a problem with it. I just think it's, you know, he's already shut, because you've got to take it at what are they trying to show with these bits, like as in what is the message, yeah? And the message here is that Superman values all life, yeah, whether that be a human, dog, kaiju, squirrel. And him saving the squirrel, it just seems silly. I suppose it's to show that Superman is an idealist. And then you have the Justice Gang who end up killing the kaiju anyway. Well, surely if Superman really cared that much, he would have stopped the Justice Gang. And I fucking hate that they call him the Justice Gang, by the way. But hey ho. He probably would have stopped the Justice Gang from killing the kaiju. That is in the realms of Superman's ability. He probably would have stopped them from doing that, or could have stopped them from doing that. But hey ho. That's what happened. What do you think about that one? Just let me know. Anyway, that's why I think that Superman versus the Elite is the better Superman than Superman 2025. If you like this video, you might like my discussion on Cecil Stedman from Invincible. Thanks for watching this far. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Uber Duck out.